This is stop number 4 in the 1986 Unlimited Hydroplane Racing season. We're in Evansville, Indiana, and that is the last stop before we hit the West Coast, Tri-Cities and Seattle. But now that we are well into the season, national points become ever so critical, and we have the man next to me who is the national point leader by 600 points, Jim Kropfeld in the Miss Budweiser. James, it's getting tight now, isn't it?
It's getting tighter with all the problems we've had on the Budweiser turbine here. Gearbox is going bad and not finding the right propeller. Chip's kind of catching up with us a little bit.
That being Chip Hanauer. Now, you worked on the gearboxes, the crew, over the past couple of days. Is everything taken care of?
It seems fine. I went out twice this morning, and I thrashed it pretty hard, and I couldn't hurt anything, so I think they did a perfect job. Well,
your old buddy, Jack Schaefer, just qualified, I believe, in the Freedom Festival. Jim Henrik is down there now. Let's see what happened.
The story here, Don Foyer, is at the last minute. I mean the last minute. The U-15 Miss Liberty with Jack Schaefer qualified right on the nose of 105. 3 attempts. You came back in. They said a 104.5. I heard you say, let go of the lines. I'm going for it again.
Well, you didn't see the whip they had in their hand, and I figured I didn't want to come back unqualified, so we went out back out and drove it hard. These guys have worked their rear ends off.
Oh, you had Cooper and of course, the Grammer here? Listen, this guy was teary-eyed when you made it.
Yeah, you're right about that. Who wouldn't be?
Okay. Happy news from the Miss Liberty Cap. Now let's take a look at Heat 1A. And the rundown is the old boy Alberta with George Johnson, who likewise qualified just before race time this morning, 107.271. The Risley's Express with Todd Yarling out of Madison, likewise 107.946. The Budweiser with Jim Kropfeld at 115.2. And the Miller American with Chip Hanauer at 132.4. And that's the way they stack up for Heat 1A. Now, Don, how about Heat 1B?
All right, Jim, let's take a look at Heat 1B in Thunder on the Ohio 8. And as we said just a few minutes ago, the Freedom Festival with Jack Schaefer qualified at 105.4. Next, the Holset Miss Madison with one of the best drivers around, Ron Snyder, qualifying at 111.7. The U2, Joe Ritchie Spirit of America, Tom Deeth out of Detroit, qualifying at 116.4. Ran very well this morning, by the way. And the top qualifier in Heat 1B, the Miss 711, running very well with driver Steve Reynolds at 130.3 miles per hour. Our 8-boat field is set. Thunder on the Ohio is ready to begin. And we'll have Heat 1A for you right after this commercial timeout. Welcome back to Evansville. This is Jim Kropfeld getting into the Budweiser turbine. He is the national point leader by a slim 600-point margin. George Johnson and the Oboy Alberto out of Seattle. A little trouble getting that stock Allison with the turbocharger going. And, of course, Chip Hanauer, a winner of 2 straight this year and his 5th straight Gold Cup. George Johnson out of Seattle, as I said, will be running in Heat 1A in the Oboy Alberto. Todd Yarling, about 3 hours away from home. He lives in Indiana and drives the Risley Express. Jim Kropfeld, the Miss Budweiser. And he will be meeting his old foe, Chip Hanauer, in the Miller American in Heat 1A. And already it looks like the Oboy Alberto is in trouble. In fact, George Johnson may have blown a turbo. In the meantime, here come the 2 turbines coming down for the start. A legal start, nowhere near the starting buoy. The Miller American in lane number 2 and the Budweiser on the inside with Jim Kropfeld. This is a 2-mile course, a slight dogleg coming down the main straightaway. You see the boats turn right about there as they head into the first turn on the west end of the course. Miller American, slight lead coming into the first turn, but good positioning on the part of the Budweiser. The drivers like this course very much. You see the Budweiser now moving up. Pretty good water here today, fairly calm. It was very choppy yesterday. Look at Kropfeld. This is George Johnson still running, but I think he has blown a turbo. He'll try to get points if at all possible. But in the meantime, it is the Budweiser in first place, flying down the straightaway. Look at the Miller moving up, though, as they go into that turn. Now let's see how these 2 pros, these 2 veterans, handle that turn as they come around. I can't believe how much better this Budweiser boat is handling since Detroit and earlier in the year. Look at this shot. The 2 turbines, 2 veterans coming down the main straightaway. In the foreground is the Risley's Express with Todd Yarling. Lap speed for the Budweiser, 130.0 miles per hour, 127 plus for the Miller American. The Budweiser with Kropfeld. He really hasn't defeated Chip Hanauer yet head-to-head when these two boats were at their best, but right now he is getting the better of his old friend, Chip Hanauer, and the Miller American down the back chute. About a rooster tail lead for the Budweiser Turbine. Bud Griffin is not here for this race. He was sent back to Seattle. But in the meantime, the big brother, Jim Kropfeld, and the Budweiser Turbine doing just fine. And keep in mind, every heat is oh so important in the national points race now as we get almost midway through the 1986 season. He has a 600-point lead over the Miller American. Here they come around the second turn, the east turn here on the Ohio River on this 2-mile course. Bernie Little, he's got a 600-point lead in the national points race and could pick up another 100 points in his margin here to make it 700 with a victory in Heat 1A. The Bud Turbine, right behind him, Chip Hanauer and the Miller American, winner of this 5th straight Gold Cup here in 1986 and a winner in Madison just a week ago, about 3 miles upriver from here. Beautiful shot of the Budweiser coming in now. That first turn, a little choppy. If either turn will be choppy at all, it'll be this one, especially later on in the day. Two turbines out in front. Speed on that second lap for the Budweiser, 130.2 miles per hour, 125 for the Miller American. A lot of air getting under the Miller, and he seems to be settling down and willing to take second place at this stage anyway. They go 5 laps, a normal format of 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B, and then the final, unlike the experimental format we saw in Madison last week, where they ran only 3 laps, but had 3 flights of preliminary heats before the final. The Budweiser looking absolutely gorgeous as it goes by the Risley's Express. Todd Yarling aboard. They've had turbocharged problems, but hope to get enough points to get into the final and go for the money. Here comes the Budweiser Turbine in first place. Jim Kropfeld out of Cincinnati, Ohio, trying to get another 400 for the Budweiser. Ron Brown watching his boat go by. Chip Hanauer holding on to lane number 1, but he is in second place here in Heat 1A of the Thunder on the Ohio 8. The Risley's Express and Todd Yarling. Risley's a longtime sponsor for hydroplane racing here in southern Indiana. This boat, as we said earlier, running so much better now, getting a lot more air under it and much more stable and not so responsive when it hits those bigger waves like it did in Detroit. Kropfeld, one of the masters in turning these big Thunder boats. Here comes Chip Hanauer. You're almost riding with him as you hear the sound of that Lycoming L7 turbine engine. The Budweiser in first place in Heat 1A. Kropfeld, a member of the ATVA Hall of Champions many times over, as is Chip Hanauer, the man right behind him, as they go down the back chute. The back straightaway here on the Ohio is simply a straight line, but as they come around the turn, they look at that dog leg to the left coming down the main straightaway. Gorgeous shot of the Budweiser coming around the second turn and heading down in front of better than 70,000 fans. Just going into the turn, as you see, is the Miller American, and the checkered flag awaits Jim Kropfeld and the Budweiser Turbine. 400 points to the Bud in Heat 1A. Bernie Little happy to see that as he defeats Chip Hanauer and the Miller American. Second place to the Miller. And third place to Risley's Express. With an amazing average speed of 128.7 miles per hour, the Budweiser getting the victory. Miller American right up there, too, at 126. Very fast heat. Risley's Express getting 225 points.
First time that you've gone head-to-head with Chip Hanauer, and this time you beat him.
Well, that's why we're here, to go out and beat. You know, the Budweiser guys, they worked all night on that gearbox, and we had a lot of problems over the weekend, and at Detroit also, but they did a fantastic job, and we're
all the way.
Down at the Miller camp, we understand the boat is suffering from some handling problems. That later on, back in a minute. Heat 1B is next on tap. This is Steve Reynolds in the 711. Ron Snyder and the Wholesome Miss Madison, the Joe Ritchie Spirit of Detroit with Tom DeEath. I think that's the Joe Ritchie Spirit of America. They changed the name. And the 711 heading out with Steve Reynolds, the second fastest qualifier. Now let's look at the drivers' faces as we go in for another preliminary heat with 4 drivers. Jack Schaefer Jr., the man who qualified just before racing started today. Ron Snyder, one of the best starting drivers around. When it comes to the start, he's always there. Tom DeEath and the Joe Ritchie Spirit of America. And finally, out of Seattle, Steve Reynolds and the Turbine Miss 711. All 4 boats are running for Heat 1B. As they come down, you can hear the countdown. driver Steve Reynolds on the outside. Ron Steiner on the inside in the Holson Miss Madison as they go into that first turn. The slight dog leg to the left on this 2-mile course here on the Ohio River. The Evansville Thunder on the Ohio, one of the greatest places in the country to race. And you see Snyder with great position, keeping the 7-11 on his outside hip as they go into the turn. Reynolds with a turbine engine. Steve Woomer, the owner of that boat, watching his driver Steve Reynolds now coming into the turn. A beautifully handling boat. Very, very good turning boat with a big air scoop on top. That was added in Detroit after discovering the engine needed more air while racing down in Miami. Coming down on lap number 1, the 7-11 in the lead, and the speed 124 miles per hour for the 7-11. Good race for second and third. Joe Ritchie, Spirit of America, in second place, and Snyder on the outside. But the leader right now, the man out of Seattle, Washington, looking for his first victory. Oh, you can hear it. That's the compressor stall of the turbine engine, which means the engine either needs more air, more fuel. Something is wrong. But in the meantime, Reynolds holds on to first place. Jack Schaefer Jr., the man who qualified earlier today, back to the 7-11 in the lead in the opposite turn of Schaefer and the Miss Freedoms Festival. This is Reynolds. Again, that scoop was added in Detroit, and they've even cut away more of the fiberglass inside to force more air into that Lycoming engine. Snyder, third place in the Holson Miss Madison. First place, the 7-11. The boat with brand new sponsons. They've had engine problems in the past, and they are today, it sounds like, even though he is maintaining a pretty good speed of 122 miles per hour. A Merlin piston engine powers the Joe Ritchie Spirit of America, and an Allison turbocharged engine, as you saw in Ron Snyder's Holson Miss Madison. Coming down the main straightaway again, here on the Ohio, Steve Reynolds. Hear the whine of the propeller. That's the propeller going in and out of the water. You can even hear the water hitting the sponsons because the engine is so quiet. A rough ride, as you saw, for Jack Schaefer Jr. Anytime you're sitting behind the engine back near the transom, it is 3 times as rough as it might be in a cab-over design boat. Now watch Snyder here. Watch his head bouncing back and forth. Can you imagine the rough ride he is going through as he goes into a turn? He doesn't have seat belts either like this man, Steve Reynolds, in a cab-over design and the enclosed cockpit, an F-16 canopy over him, plus a 5-point belt safety system that keeps him into the seat. Steve Reynolds heading down the straightaway for the last time. Second place for this man, Tom DeEath in the Joe Ritchie, but first place goes to Steve Reynolds in the 7-11. 400 points to the turbine boat, and 300 to the Joe Ritchie Spirit of America, Tom DeEath. Third place, Snyder, and the Holson Miss Madison. Here are the results, and we have just gotten word from the tower that the Joe Ritchie was disqualified. So the Holson Miss Madison gets 300 points, and the Freedom Festival 225. We'll talk about that in a moment, but first let's talk to the winner of the heat, Steve Reynolds.
Looks like the boat is running a lot better than last week.
We've still got some minor engine problems. You know, the thing is still compressor stalling a little bit, and I still think that I'm down about 15 miles an hour on the top end, but kind of hard to find fault with the wind, isn't it?
In regards to the disqualification, the Joe Ritchie, the boat on the left inside the circle, was charged for moving from lane 2 into lane number 1, cutting off Jack Schaefer. Right there, you see the boat on the far right going up into the air just a bit. As a result, the Joe Ritchie lost all 300 points in Heat 1B. Let's get official word from Chief Referee Mike Noonan.
The call was made from our helicopter who was watching the lanes coming down for the start. At the dog leg, at the start-finish line buoy, the U2 made a lane change from lane 2 into lane 1. At the dog leg, the boat U15 was on his inside in lane 1 and was chopped with less than 5 boat length overlap.
That was at the start of the race.
That was at the start of the race, that's correct.
I think it's wrong.
Okay, we've talked to Mike Noonan. What's your opinion of it?
Well, they threw me out. That's all there is to it. And I'll guarantee this is going to be my say la vie to this whole sport. I'm gone. I mean, I've had it with all this crap.
Tom's boat is scheduled for the next heat. We'll see him back in a moment.